It is essential for our struggle for self-determination that we speak of love, as love is the necessary foundation enabling us to survive the wars, the hardships, and the sickness and the dying with our spirits intact. Bell Hooks, Teaching Critical Thinking. The Daily Grind, Chapter 178. Overhead, gray and tan panels of roughly carpeted material rose up, met, clashed, and merged. Against a fluorescent sky, a horizon full of hard angles and massive constructs seemed to reach up forever, an artificial horizon for an artificial reality. The form of an office environment, stolen and copied over and over and over, until the lines blurred and went fuzzy, and what a cubicle was became unclear. Flocks of printer paper fluttered across the false sky, preyed on by the occasional vicious paper airplane. Below, on the hard carpet floor, cautious, curious, and terrified life forms scavenged and fought, while dangerous apex guardians prowled among them, searching for any sign of intruders. On a much more local level, two increasingly frustrated intruders were busy trying to cut through vines of dot matrix paper, hanging and dangling strips from overhangs formed from the cubicles that now rose to well over 15 feet high around them. The paper vines looked fragile, and often were, but the edges were far sharper than they had any right to be. "Why are these paper things so thinging sharp?" Sarah was doing her best to keep from yelling. It was going fairly well. She wasn't an idiot, after all, and she had experience in this place that told her to keep the volume down. But it felt important to give voice to her irritation as she tried to yank one of the vines in their way down, and just got another shallow scratch on the blade of the machete that she was waving around. Anesh wasn't having much more luck on his end when it came to getting a path cleared, but he was managing to not get too frustrated, or to giggle at his companion's antics. Perched on his backpack, Ganesh just held on and stayed out of the way, folded insect legs holding a flap of protected cloth over the drone's head, just in case. Ganesh didn't offer commentary, but Anesh was pretty sure he'd be laughing if it were an option for the little guy. "I think that's the closest I've heard you come to swearing," Anesh commented to Sarah, letting the machete he was holding swing down to hang at his side. "You know, I think this way might be a bit mucked. Want to circle around?" "No!" Sarah exclaimed, taking another experimental jab at what looked like a thin part of the vine layers. "It's hiding something. I can feel it." "Really? Or are you just being dramatic?" It could have gone either way. She turned and fixed Anesh with a withering glower that no amount of acting skill would let her keep from cracking into a grin for longer than a few seconds. "All right, it's dramatic," Sarah admitted, stepping back, carefully dodging one of the strips of paper on the ground. Even after they were pulled down, they were still razor sharp. "Also, I swear. I could totally do a swear." "Really? Or are you just—" Anesh was giving a companionable smirk when he was cut off. "Oh, hush." Sarah sheathed her machete and cocked a stare at the office jungle. Hands perched on her hips, back arched as she looked up at the enormity of the problem. "Okay, let's try circling. How far back was the last intersection?" "Only 100 meters or so." Anesh pulled out the notepad he had clipped to his side and was using to keep map notes. Some people use their phones. Anesh refused to bring his phone into the office. "Just before that exploding water cooler trap." Sarah nodded nostalgically. "Good times. Good times." "Well, times, anyway," Anesh countered, folding up his notes. "We can try circling right, but I don't know. This place looks like it was meant to be a threshold." It did, too. 20 feet overhead, the arch of cubicle walls dangled a thick forest of vines, but that wasn't where the architecture ended. It wasn't like a normal wall, which they had found before in here, acting as usually impassable barriers, but it was more like the geometry around one of the sunken caves. Wall panels that just barely didn't line up properly, giving the impression more of a cliff face than a piece of structure. Officium mundi plants growing out of creases and nooks all across the edifice. It actually reminded Anesh a lot of the cliffsides in Winter's Climb, only less cold and less... Well, he was going to think less hostile, but given that they were being prevented from passing under the whole array by a riot of small paper blades, maybe that wasn't a correct assessment. You think it'll just be more like this? Sarah asked. I don't know, I've never really seen anything like it. She folded her arms over her lightly armored chest. I'm curious, and you know what that means. That you are a cat? I don't know what that means, Anesh admitted softly. Sarah's shoulders sagged briefly. Oh, right. She sounded for a second, as small as she looked, standing in the middle of an endless office environment, but only for a second before she regained her composure. Well, now you get to learn again. It means we're going on an adventure. I'm filled with sudden inexplicable worry. Anesh blinked, speaking before he realized what he'd said. Oh, good, you do remember. Sarah sounded far too cheerful. All right, let's go. Wait, I never came in here with you in the first go-around, Anesh protested, adjusting his pack and letting Ganesh settle in on his shoulder before softly jogging to catch up to Sarah, who had almost immediately turned and started leading the way back down the hallway they'd taken. Why do I have an emotional fear reaction to this? We were friends outside Officia Mundi, you goof, Sarah told him, rolling her eyes. Also, would you believe I didn't get up to many adventures in here? Not that I really remember a lot of it. Her voice was wry, in a way that Anesh didn't hear from her very often. That said, Anesh hadn't really hung out with Sarah that much at all, and he suddenly realized this exploratory delve was maybe the first one-on-one time that they'd had together in a while, maybe since she'd come back at all. What adventures did you get up to in here? Anesh asked, trying to be companionable without prying too hard. Oh, the usual, I guess. We came in through a different door, but I don't remember where it is, you know? I know we found our door at one point, so it can't be too far away, like, geographically, but it's not like it's easy to camp every door in a building for a whole week. Sarah shrugged. I remember there was a big chasm we tried climbing down once. One of the guys swore they saw the tops of light panels, but we ran out of rope. There was an office that had shifting sticky notes all over the walls, like chameleon scales. I remember a bunch of little stuff. And the skill orbs, all of those. But I didn't get too many, honestly. Have you... Anesh paused, both out of an awkward, culturally instilled directive to not talk about emotions, and also because he needed to check a corner for ambush before he and Sarah moved on. It was good timing. Have you tried maybe asking Planner or Pathfinder to help you get back what you lost? Making a new infomorph, maybe, just for that? He glanced over at his companion. Sounds horrifying, not remembering all that. Sarah gave him a brittle smile. It's not so bad. At least I remember I had a team, right? Even if I can't remember their faces. The words were an obvious lie. And everyone now is great, even if you have been avoiding me for a year. I've been busy. Also, I swear we've talked before now, Anesh defended himself. We went out to dinner. He was going to say more, but they were caught up in a conversation and didn't properly check the corner at the next intersection they were planning to use to circle the jungle, so, naturally, that was where the ambush was waiting. How exactly a potted plant snuck up on a person was not the issue. The issue would be finding a way to edit the ops manual to inform everyone that potted plants could do that, without admitting that they had just been jump-scared by a stationary object. Here, Anesh offered Sarah one of the 2 yellow orbs from the potted plant, which she took with a stiff movement while Ganesh perched on her head and carefully applied a bandage to where one of the vines had cracked across her forehead so hard it had drawn blood. I've got a backlog of these to copy anyway, so have fun, he said, cracking his own. +1 skill rank. Pilot. Fixed-wing aircraft. Sarah gave him a smile and did the same for her own, letting the brief alien thought in her head guide her to what new knowledge she had just picked up. It was a familiar sensation, but also one that she hadn't gotten to indulge nearly as much as she did now that she was back with her friends. plus .9 skill ranks. Gambling. Baccarat. Still confused as to why some of these give part ranks, Sarah said, watching the colorful dust of the orb fade to nothingness. Anesh, pulling a chair in from an adjacent cubicle and sliding his backpack to the floor as he dropped onto it, perked up at the question he could actually answer about the dungeon. They have a structured drop-off in effectiveness if they're copies of an orb you've already used. I think they stop doing anything entirely after 4. It goes 1, 0.6, 0.2, 0.1, nothing. He thought for a second and then corrected. Okay, it's probably not nothing, but plus 0 skill ranks, so it doesn't tell you. So, nothing. Okay, but this one wasn't a copy. What did you get? Anesh asked. I got flying. You can fly? Sarah pouted at him. That's not fair. I want to fly. Wait, wouldn't that be a purple? Fly an aircraft, you goof. Anesh couldn't help but laugh at Sarah's antics, her style of language infecting his conversational habits. The girl was all over the place sometimes, but he got why she was friends with James. And everyone else, himself included. She was just devoted to being a friend, really. Anyway, what did you get? Because you get partial ranks if you've already learned something. I think it rounds you up to the nearest rank, whatever a rank is. Still can't figure out a meaningful way to measure that. Baccarat. The card game. Anesh tilted his head. I guess we haven't talked much. I didn't know you were into that. I'm not. I just know things because I am wise and terrible. Sarah waggled her fingers at him like what she imagined a great wizard would look like. Anesh stared back analytically. He said simply. Sarah dropped her hands. Also, I watch a lot of random stuff on YouTube, she admitted. Me too, Anesh smiled. Me too. Well, at least now we have a promising set of careers ahead of us, a pilot and a gambler. He stood and offered Sarah a hand up, wincing as the bruise on his arm pulled tight. Actually, that sounds like the start of a great adventure show. We should make that. Sarah took the hand and sprung to her feet, light frame making the motion look effortless. Ah, and now we get to one of those depressing things James made me think about, so now you have to think about it too. Oh, bloody hell, what? Anesh resigned himself to his fate as he added a collection of pens from the desk to his backpack before zipping it back up and shouldering it. Well, you can fly a plane now, right? Sarah prompted. In theory. Probably. Yes, some planes. Anesh didn't take any of the heavier stuff in the cubicle because they still had kilometers left to go today, but he did scrounge $50 out of a billfold hidden in one of the drawers. Okay, perhaps I'm underselling myself. Many planes, though only one plane at a time. So you could get a job as a pilot, Sarah prompted. Anesh stopped and slowly looked at her. No, he said, realizing where this was going. Yeah, you see it. Sarah looked a little too happy to have sprung this revelation on her friend. We live in a world where knowing how to do something and being good at a skill doesn't make you qualified to do it as a job. That's weird. That's bad. She declared the last bit a little too loud, hand pointed up to the ceiling with her index finger extended as she passed judgment on society. From around them, behind walls that didn't muffle sound nearly enough, a burst of scratching noises and error tones came to life. Ah, piss, Anesh grumbled. Too loud, friend. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered back. Sorry's for a little later. Go, he hissed back, securing his bag and hoisting his hand into the air, launching Ganesh over them with a buzz of gossamer wings, while Sarah grabbed the bat she'd brought along and bolted. Neither of them drew their machetes. Those were for clearing obstacles, and basically nothing else. Too many problems fighting with the tools had taught everyone that. The majority of things in the office had shells made out of metal and plastic, and they weren't really the kind of thing that you could just cut. Despite Sarah's careless slip, they did have a standard plan for this situation. Retreat toward explored sections, only fight if you had to. Remember that abandoning any gear was preferable to abandoning any people. With that in mind, Anesh ducked after Sarah, who was staying low and running to the hall they had come down to get to this part of the dungeon. To their left, a pair of shalaxies making predatory dings were crawling out of holes in the cubicle walls. The larger of the pair was covered with illipedes that were latched on like lampreys. Anesh pulled one of the electromagnets off his armor's rigging, twisted it to engage the battery, and flung it sideways down the hall before chasing behind Sarah. Swarms in Officiamundi could come out of nowhere. Sometimes you could fire a gun and attract no attention. Other times, a single word slightly too loud could trigger a horde of the local creatures pouring over the walls and out from hidden nests to try to murder an unfortunate delve team. Right now, it felt like the locals were everything that Officiamundi had. Ahead of him, Anesh saw Sarah leap over a snapping alligator clip before bringing her bat up in a whirling arc, taking a stapler out of the air with a shouted, "Sorry!" yelled over her shoulder. Anesh wasn't sure if she was yelling at him or the stapler, but he snatched the yellow orb out of the air as it fell, making a less graceful and more violent jump over the black plastic snapper that tried to take his leg off. As his boot crunched off its snout, he fumbled his gloved fingers into a pocket and pulled out the pen that got brighter the longer it was open, flipped the cap off, and dropped it behind him. At the end of the day, a flashbang would probably be cheaper than a magic pen that accomplished the same thing, but right now, anything between them and the stuff chasing them was a perk. Ahead of him, Sarah called a check-in, and Anesh answered, letting her know he was still good, still alive. Without looking, she took a corner, sliding into an acrobatic roll along the floor that Anesh envied her for being able to do so casually. He had to slow down himself, and almost crashed into a vending machine anyway, which he apologized to, slapping an electric mouse into the wall to his left with a chitinous crunch before it could try to electrocute him as he took the corner. The place was crawling with life all of a sudden, when it had seemed so empty and quiet on the way in. Anesh almost slammed into Sarah's back, the girl standing still right in the middle of the hall ahead of him. It took him a second to realize she wasn't standing. She was unmoving. Anesh uttered something he was pretty sure was a rude word as he exhaled and pushed the magic from the winter's climb out into the world. James had taken something for architecture, because that's who James was. Nick had grabbed something that he thought would be good for healing, because that's how Nick was. But Anesh was a mathematician. Not for an end goal, but because he understood it, and he loved the work itself. So he had started with the tattered textbook on spatial geometry, and just accepted that even though the spell wasn't going to be about math, he was going to get what he got. What he had gotten was Fractal Avalanche, a spell that cost 2 breaths and told him that it lasted for seconds, but lied about that. The magic had settled into his lungs, just underneath the ball of power that accumulated as he breathed normally. And now he pushed out that breath and the spell along with it. Unfortunately, this was one case where having multiple bodies wasn't a great solution. Every iteration of him, as long as they stayed updated, actually shared a breath pool somehow, which would mean that the rest of him would be getting a painful cold signal that one of them was casting as the spell went off. Fortunately, though, at the end of the day, even if the mana pool didn't work quite right, the spell did exactly what he wanted it to. Anesh moved around Sarah, his sensory self emanating from what would have been his actual position, but his physical form shattered into 3 different pieces. He got a good look at the camera conda that was staring her down, too. Blue Ethernet cable and one of those domed pod cameras for a head, and a set of 2 rows of green LEDs down its flanks. It was weird. None of the camera condas that had become part of the Order had LEDs on them. Maybe they were an older model. Maybe they were a newer one. And then, with minimal time to consider that, from 3 different perspectives, Anesh slammed into the camera conda as he reformed into a single entity. The end result was him on the ground with the snake in a chokehold, one hand clamped over its eye so hard he felt the plastic chitin cracking. At least one of his projections had elbow-dropped the monster in the side of its neck, and its thrashing was weaker than Anesh expected as he pinned it down and freed Sarah. Please stab it, he called, as the edges of the swarm still after them started to locate them from over the tops of the walls around their position. Sarah, though, was not one for stabbing. Yep, she lied, a sparkling laugh in her voice as she ran over and threw a salvaged coat over the Camerconda's head, tying off the arms tightly in its mouth with a single smooth motion as it tried to bite her. Okay, come on! She grabbed Anesh's arm and pulled him up with surprising strength, before hooking her fingers into the surface of the Camerconda's cables and yanking the 100-plus-pound serpent form up over her shoulder as well. Let's go! Sarah's adrenaline-fueled excitement failed to infect Anesh, who just shook his head and staggered after her. He felt out of breath, drained by the exertion of casting the spell, but at least he wasn't the one hauling their new captive around. It took a whole half hour of running, dodging, and skirmishing, but after that, later, they found themselves sitting against a door to an actual office space. The windows were frosted glass and obviously fake. The desk looked more like a grim altar than a place to do paperwork, and Anesh was pretty sure the lamp was staring at them. But the wall and the door were a godsend for keeping them hidden. Outside, the swarm still moved, but it was dying down as the humans couldn't be found. Next to him, Sarah was panting heavily, the Camerconda being held down by her legs as she caught her breath. Ganesh perched on his head again, similarly out of energy. Why aren't you winded? She demanded of Anesh. I don't need to breathe much, he admitted. Mountain magic takes it out of me, but running? Running's easy. We should hang out more, Sarah said, like the last half hour of frantic survival hadn't bothered her at all. Anesh grinned. Sure thing, Anesh said. We should get some kind of group D&D game going again. Somehow, I know you're into that. I'm friends with James, of course I am. Sarah sounded both excited and affronted all at once. The two of them sat there for a bit longer, Sarah leaning against Anesh's armor plate. How do you think he's doing? She asked. James? He's fine, Anesh answered. He checks in on the server, you know. He's almost to his map destination, should be home in a day or two. Sarah waved a hand. He says he's fine, but is he fine? She questioned. I posit that he is, in fact, not fine. He's... I don't know, Anesh sighed. He's felt so exhausted lately. I know he's still dealing with a lot of his depression. I just wish I could help more than I am. You could have gone with him, Sarah suggested. Get some good road trip private time in, eh? She poked his arm. Not suggestively, just teasingly. Anesh snorted. That's not what he needs, and you know it. Probably. Also, are we back to the friend stage where you're going to be shipping us? I don't know why, but I have this feeling that that was also a thing. That was absolutely a thing, Sarah confirmed. Also, I just realized James has my car, so he isn't allowed telepad back, so it might be a few more days. Yeah, let's send the golem to pick him up, Anesh decided. Speaking of, he looked down at the squirming Camerconda and then back up at the standing lamp that was absolutely watching him. He was sure of it now. Do you want to telepad back to home base? I feel like we're not getting through that jungle today. Despite crushing Sarah's dream of seeing an overgrown, living part of the office, she did agree. After only a little dramatic bemoaning, too. The two of them were welcomed back by the guard shift as they dropped off their findings, the pile of orbs they'd collected, and one prisoner that, hopefully, one day, might be one friend. Then they settled in to wait, or to be backup for someone else who might need it while they explored their own sections. Just another day at the office, really. Momo was having a bad day, was looking to express that in a way that was probably unhealthy and self-destructive, or, at the very least, just regular destructive. Oh, hello, Lua greeted her with a bit of surprise as Momo rounded the ramp leading into the depths of the high school. It surprised Momo a bit to see her there, but then the Order had been trying to keep an active watch on this door, and Lua worked here anyway. The actual why Lua worked here made sense to Momo. The woman just wanted to rebuild a life, do work with the skills she had built up over a lifetime. It was just strange to her every time she met someone who tried to distance themselves from the hidden magic of the world, though Lua did still keep watch for them when it mattered. Momo kind of just wished she wasn't keeping watch now. "Hey, Lua," she returned the greeting pleasantly, making her voice as normal as she could. "Just here to check a couple things. Door's not open, is it?" What a loaded question. "It is, which you should know, school hours until everyone has gone home for the night." Lua didn't exactly narrow her eyes, but caught off guard like this, her voice betrayed suspicion. "Wait, what about night security?" Momo asked, suddenly legitimately curious and distracted by it. Lua's answer was, again, not openly scornful, but maybe had a hint of mild, bitter amusement. "Momo, this is a relatively small school in the middle of an upper-class suburb," she said, and then, more directly, "Momo, what are you doing here?" If Momo could have hidden the duffel bag she was carrying behind her back, she would have, but she'd been caught unawares, and now looked a bit obvious if she tried. "Nothing?" she ventured. "Young lady," Lua's words were stern and disappointed as she crossed her arms. "Does no one get that I'm 23?" Momo was suddenly offended, and it merged with the lingering anger in her chest. "I'll be fine. I'm just checking some stuff, or something. Whatever. I'll come right back out." She pulled something out of her pocket. "Look, got a telepad and everything." Momo waggled the paper around like it was a passport to anywhere, which, well, it kind of was. Lua's voice was almost a whisper. "That door doesn't open from the other side, you know." "I know," Momo snarled. "I don't care. Please let me get by, because we both know you can't actually stop me." It was the closest thing Momo had ever come to threatening someone. She regretted it instantly, but she didn't know what to do to take it back, or if she could, or if she really wanted to in the moment. There was more worry than hurt in Lua's eyes, though. Even as she stepped aside, she was saying something reassuring to Momo that the younger woman didn't properly hear over the rushing sound in her ears. And then she was through the door. As the rusted metal and flaked blue security paint of the door shut behind her with all the violence of a row of prison bars being slammed, Momo didn't waste time finding a mostly dry spot on the rough concrete floor and dropping her bag. The entrance room was as disgusting as ever. Some kind of algae grew here in dripping lines from broken shower heads around the walls that had probably never had actual water run through them. The recessed drains in the floor had red and brown liquid stains surrounding them, and almost the whole place was damp, which unfortunately probably explained why the room smelled like stale sweat and wet dog vomit. Obscured graffiti lined the walls, wordless and intimidating, hidden by the local infomorphs. Momo didn't waste time strapping the hard shell armor plates over her clothes. She'd worn stuff she didn't really care about today, which mostly meant she was wearing shredded jeans and a shirt so faded she didn't remember if it was from a band or a con. Nothing of value to be lost when something inevitably puked acid on her. She fell into a rhythm with her motions. Armor out of the bag, pull it on, tighten straps, hook to another plate, repeat. It took her only a few minutes to be good to go, even though she wasn't used to doing this alone. Still moving rapidly so she didn't have to linger, she brought out the parts of a staff, screwed them together, and then propped it up against the bag while she flicked a phone flashlight on and tucked the light into her armor's chest rig. The dungeon, of course, wouldn't let her bring knives in, which was annoying, but at least all the thick glass bottles she brought were intact. Then she added a half-dozen inactive scrambler totems to her belt pouches, flipped open a pair of Dungeon Tech glasses that highlighted sharp lines just in case, and stood up to get moving. Which was when she heard the door slam shut again, and jerked in startled fear as she realized someone had followed her in here. "Fucking damn it, Lua!" Momo snapped through the filter mask she was wearing as she turned around. "I don't need..." She trailed off as Simon, already in his own armor, grimaced at the smell. Eh, her friend muttered. Nope, still hate this, he added, as he rummaged through a much smaller bag than hers. Really wish this place didn't repel the full gas mask treatment, he said, complaining like Momo wasn't staring daggers at him as he pulled out a much less effective mask that matched her own and set it over his mouth and nose. Added to that was an aluminum baseball bat he pulled off a loop on his backpack before he set his own phone flashlight. All right, ready, he commented, ignoring Momo's glare. What are you doing here? She demanded. Delving, Simon said, voice neutral. You said or not? Momo tried. She really did her best to keep glaring for long enough that Simon just left, but he wasn't giving her a reaction to it, and she was wasting time, and it didn't matter anyway, so... Yeah, sure, Momo sighed angrily. Let's go. So they went. Into the tunnels of clustered pipes, their lights doing a poor job of providing any real illumination, but still letting them take cautious steps without the panic of walking in pitch darkness. The smell of the entrance faded, slowly, replaced almost without notice by the scent of burnt meat and rotting fruit. The sounds of liquids dripping and flowing would occasionally cascade through the pipes, sometimes with bits splattering out of jagged gashes in the walls around them. Momo pointed those out when her glasses lit them up for her, and the pair steered clear of the obvious hazards. The dungeon, she thought grimly, had been growing, changing. The path they were on had split multiple times by now, no longer a straight shot of a tunnel. Not only that, but the tunnel wasn't a straight line either. It had swells and dips in elevation, twisted and curved. The branches were almost always dead ends, very short ones too, but that didn't change that this was becoming less of a hike and more of a maze. More like an actual dungeon. One of the branches ended with a packed dirt floor, recessed into the pipes that still coiled around the wall like inorganic veins. In the middle of the floor, two raised dirt pillars stood, one higher than the other, both of them over a glowing green pond of thick slime. The taller pillar had one of those handprint indentations the ops manual mentioned. They still didn't know what those were for, but Simon had just shrugged, handed his bag to Momo, gotten a running start, and launched himself in a high jump that took him higher than a human should have been able to go. He'd slammed into the taller pillar's lip with his chest, and pulled himself up easily to press his hand into the waiting slot, unleashing a small burst of purple sparks that funneled into his arm. Show off, Momo muttered as she handed him back his bag, the first words she'd spoken since they'd come in. The two of them kept going, Momo taking every opportunity to slam her steel-toe boots down on the skittering bugs that would sometimes dart out from hidey holes or skitter across the pipe when light touched them. Every chitinous pop as she killed one accompanied by a single red spark and a more human burst of a vindictive rush. It was when they came to a more open section that things started to get really bad, though. The floor fell away around them, as did the walls. There was just the unstable pipes underfoot, a cavernous space overhead, and a black abyss below. A musty wind whistled past, pushing them downward, while an unhealthy blue glow emanated from multiple holes in the pipes ahead. The only thing that made this even remotely doable was that the pipe bridge was basically flat, and still about 8 feet wide. Momo went first, Simon followed, both of them on high alert. Which was the main reason why, when the first rat roach threw itself from a recessed hole in the side of the wall to land in front of them, Momo didn't even let it get its knife up to threaten her before she whipped her staff around, twisting her whole body to make sure it hit with as much force as she could muster. The strike hit the side of the rat roach's neck, crushed it inward, snapping bone and chitin and pulverizing flesh, and flinging the creature sideways. It dropped limply, and Momo howled at it as she stepped forward and planted a kick into the downed creature's face, sending it sliding back and finally over the edge of the tubes. If it wasn't a corpse already, that was too bad for it, because it would be falling for as long as the dungeon had left that space open. Then the next rat roach hit the bridge, and Momo didn't hesitate before doing something similar to that one. Her world narrowed down to the fight. Bluish ichor, or blood, or whatever Deb had decided it was, red sparks from the kills, the burn of her muscles as she swung her staff hard enough to break bones and shatter chitin. The feral screams of the bug creatures that were still throwing themselves at her, and the clinical tactical choice of activating a few of her scrambler totems and flinging them into the nests along the walls. It all blurred together. She barely noticed when Simon's bat whirled through the air from a judicious fling just over her head and ricocheted off a diving wasp thing just before it hit her, sending both the bat and wasp spiraling downward. Or Simon kicking away the rat roach that managed to get all three of its hands wrapped around her leg to try to drag her off balance and over the edge. She didn't notice much of anything, really, until there weren't any more things trying to kill them. Momo stood in the middle of a bridge over a hole too deep to see the bottom, panting through her mask, covered in other things' blood that hissed and sizzled as it tried to eat through her armor and shoes. She looked down at the now broken length of wood in her hands almost curiously, before dropping it over the edge to silently fall away. But then she just stood there. "Holy shit," she heard Simon mutter from behind her. "Let's go," Momo said, adjusting the strap of her bag and taking steps that shook more than she had expected toward the other side of the room. Once they were off the bridge and the tunnel was more or less empty around them, Simon called for a stop. Demanded it, really. "Hold up," he said. "I need a drink." He pulled out a bottle of water, downed about half of it before offering it to Momo, who waved it off. "Stay hydrated," Simon said simply, making that a command too. Reluctantly, Momo took the accepted bottle and sipped at it, before realizing how thirsty she was, and also that she had the taste of something acidic in her mouth, gulping down the rest of the water. "Thanks," she mumbled. "Yeah, of course," Simon said, not bothering to hide his worry. It wasn't fair, Momo thought, how fucking nice her friends were. She hadn't even really hung out with Simon or other James since they stopped being two people, actually. It wasn't fair that he cared about her this much, that he was here prowling through a sewer with her instead of doing something useful or fun, that he was just being here, not prying or asking stupid questions or... "Nameless died," Momo said, handing back the now empty bottle. Simon paused as he took it, but only briefly, tucking the empty container back into his pack while Momo withdrew a shaking hand. "The AI?" he questioned. "Yeah." Momo tried to take a deep breath through her nose and instantly regretted it, snapping her mask back into place and coughing out the smell. "The AI I made, by accident, and then let die," she trailed off, and then turned to look at the upcoming pitch-black tunnel. "Anyway, let's..." Simon's armored form thunked into hers, arms wrapping around her front as he gave her the kind of awkward hug only somebody very supportive and also wearing riot gear possibly could. There were a lot of things Simon didn't say. "I'm sorry," because obviously he was sorry, and also there was no way to say that without it sounding hollow. "That's terrible," because of course it was terrible. Repeating the fact just drove it home and didn't solve anything. And he absolutely didn't go with, "How are you feeling?" because Simon now had approximately 2 whole lifetimes worth of experience telling him to not be that much of an idiot. There were, it turned out, a lot of words that just didn't mean anything when faced with the severing of a connection by the yawning void of death. "It's okay, you know," he said quietly instead. Momo's fury spiked, and she started to twist out of his grip. "Know it..." "To be angry, I mean," Simon said, keeping his serene attitude, feeling Momo go still as he kept talking. "Be, pissed off." "I'm not angry," Momo lied. She could almost feel Simon raising his eyebrows behind her. "Oh yeah?" he asked, pulling back and using a gloved hand to wipe a smear of deadened rat roach blood off of his armor. "Okay, You say so. Dumbass. If I was angry, there's no one to be angry at, except myself, Momo said, dropping her arms down to her sides, staring past Simon. Since I didn't do enough. That's not true, Simon said with a shrug. Momo dragged her line of sight over to her friend. What? That's not true, he repeated. There's plenty to be pissed at. Simon gave another shrug. Just the unfair nature of the world, I guess. At how cruel death is. It doesn't have to be your fault to be awful. It's okay to be angry about how awful it is. Lou is a better therapist than you, Momo eventually settled on muttering. Ah, but Lua isn't as good at watching your ass in a fight, Simon countered. Do you want to keep... Is that why you didn't hit the bird until it almost got me? Momo demanded. Too busy looking at my ass? I blame James, Simon said without hesitation. But Momo froze, the sudden reminder of their sort of dead friend bringing her up short. Oh, sorry. Simon's eyes softened, the joke fading away. It's... making fun of it helps, he said. Who are you, anyway? Momo asked, though her voice had lost a lot of her earlier anger. She realized how much her legs were trembling with either exhaustion or adrenaline, and considered finding a seat, but then remembered where they were. Are you still Simon, at all, or... Both? Neither? Simon shrugged. I'm who I am after the lines started to blur. I'm who we've always been, he said, putting a tone to his words that made it clear he had practiced that line. I'm not really Simon, any more than your Momo from 4 years ago. He paused to smash down some kind of bug with too many legs, with what looked like canine teeth that had been sneaking up on him. Do you want to keep moving? I hate this place. Momo nodded. Yeah, she said, kicking her legs out a couple of times to try to re-establish control of them. Wait, back up. So, James liked my ass? Uh-huh, Simon nodded. And you sort of are part James now? She tapped a gloved finger to her chin. Yep, Simon agreed, reaching for something and coming up empty. Damn it, I lost my bat, he muttered to himself. Momo kept nodding. So that means by the transitive property that you like. All right, let's go, Simon announced a little too quickly, pushing past her and leading them into the tunnel. Momo followed, still not okay, but doing a bit better. Simon was right, the joking helped. More pipes, more branches, dead ends, sometimes a door, which they mostly ignored. Very occasionally, they would find a question clawed into the wall that they could sometimes answer for a small burst of green sparks. They talked as they moved now, Momo starting to open up, the floodgates broken. I just didn't know what to do, she confided in Simon. I tried different totems, I tried adding stabilizing programs, I tried adding or removing hardware. Fuck, we even tried giving Nameless an authority. That didn't work? It didn't take it. Not that it didn't take, but the AI wouldn't accept it. Planner said it had to do with the nature of how Nameless thought, but I think the AI just rejected it. Momo seemed to deflate a little bit. It wasn't even trying to stay alive, she said, pain in her voice. It didn't care. Like it didn't matter. Her words came out bitter, sharper, obviously upset. And it is my fault, because I built the thing to find dungeons, not to be a person, and it's exactly the shit James is always saying, about how we don't build people to be tools or whatever, and I thought I was smarter than that. I'm supposed to be smarter than that. Her yell echoed off the pipes, and a screaming howl replied from somewhere else farther in the dungeon. Something like a too long, multi-jointed human arm with skin slewing off, sliding out of the pipes overhead and grabbing for her. Momo, having spotted the gap as they approached with her glasses, was less than surprised. She was still pretty damn angry, though, and she grabbed one of the elbows, twisted the arm around her own, and yanked, snapping the long, brittle bone inside and ripping the flesh away with a gooey splatter, like she was pulling slightly liquid taffy off of a stick. Behind her, Simon looked a bit sick as Momo threw the discarded lump of inhuman flesh to the side and continued walking. You know what the dumbest part is? Momo asked quietly, beige liquid flesh dripping off her arm guard. Simon slid the knives he had stolen off the dead rat roaches back into the loops of his own armor and made a go on gesture at her. I think it learned more from James than from me. Like James, not the dead... I hate names, she muttered. You know, Boss James. The one who recklessly goes on dungeon delves and seems to risk his life sometimes for no fucking reason. Simon looked around them, looked back at Momo, and very pointedly said absolutely nothing. Momo opened her mouth to keep talking or to ask what the fuck he was doing, when suddenly it clicked for her. Oh, she said, and then repeated in a very small voice. Oh. Doesn't mean anything, you know, Simon said roughly 20 minutes later as they paused to collect from a no longer defended pool of shaper substance. The shared recklessness thing. Doesn't make it your fault. Fuck off, Momo hissed as she filled bottles with the twisting liquid. I was supposed to be a responsible creator, and I got my kid killed. You can't even come close to knowing if that's true, Simon chastised her. You built digital life, Momers. That's probably a first for everyone. There's no parenting guide for that. He sighed into his mask. I know I can't make it better, but I'm telling you, it's not your fault. It's okay to be angry, right? But it's not your fault. Feels like it. Momo sniffed back a sob. Simon realized something very suddenly. When did it happen, anyway? He asked. Couple hours ago. He winced into his mask. And you didn't... And you came here? For the first time, his words might have had just a little bit of judgment in them. I was pissed, Momo sniffed. And now? Still pissed, she said, but also feeling gross and tired and a different angry. She sniffed again. I should have just fucking gotten Marjorie to make me a cake, eaten a whole cake, and cried in my room like a normal person. Could have saved a lot of trouble. Momo looked up. Also, thanks for following me. Yeah, any time, Simon said easily. Do you want to telepath out now? No, Momo shook her head. We're almost at the exit. I want to grab some books. Also, there's something I need to do, she said. Simon had no idea what that meant, so he shrugged and just followed her the last 50 feet or so to the mouth of the tunnel and the arena. The rest of the dungeon had gotten improvements, upgrades, alterations, but this place was the same level of dramatic nonsense it had always been. A gravel basketball court with stone bleachers and rusted chain-link fence surrounding it. The rat roaches were waiting for them, as always, a jeering crowd hissing and spitting for violence and death. This time, though, there were more of those crow-wasp things mixed in with the crowd, and Simon swore he saw something that looked like a blend of a dog and a frog mixed into the press of matted fur and chipped chitin. Yes! The white-furred rat roach in the middle of the arena greeted them, her voice rising to a howl that brought a reverent silence from the others around the place. She'd definitely gotten bigger, and was seemingly undeterred by James kidnapping her 2 lieutenants a couple of months back. 2 other rat roaches flanked her now, both of them looking worried. 8.5 feet tall, chitin polished to an opalescent sheen, the extra arm sticking out of her right arm now held up by an additional line of flesh that stretched like a ligament. 5 mismatched, faceted pink eyes blinked at them out of sync, and the acidic blue drool dripping from her fanged maw ran down carved canyons in her chin like it was meant to do so. Welcome. Shut up, Momo snapped out. The words didn't cut the rat roach off, but the pair of offensive red totems Momo clicked into place and flung at high velocity sure did. As the white rat roach, Arush had called her the beautiful one, but Momo didn't see it, frankly, and her squad all collapsed, screaming and clawing at their heads, she spread her arms and turned to a suddenly stilled audience. Hey, anyone want a ticket out of here? She yelled. Sunshine, real food. You can be super gay without anyone knifing you. I've tested it. Simon moved with a little more purpose while Momo did her thing, skirting the edges of the totem's range, ignoring the increasing yells of the rat roaches behind the fence as they raked claws and bone knives over the rusted metal. He held most of their green sparks, and so he rushed to the lockers on the other end and cracked the first 3 that he could afford, grabbing the books and shoving them into his bag as Momo kept yelling. Come on, no one? She bellowed, striding past the downed rat roaches in the middle of the arena, just flatly ignoring the information the totems were cramming into her brain. You want out? She jammed a finger toward a nervous-looking rat roach in the front row, who promptly threw a wad of something wet at Momo. The projectile was joined by others from the crowd. No one? Cowards! She screamed at them. Fucking cowards! You could have had a life. We could take all of you! Momo howled, pausing only as Simon came over and set a worried hand on her shoulder. He pointed with a nod, and Momo just looked as the beautiful one snapped one of her totem balls open with a desperate claw, smashing the internal web and the red orb inside too. Time to go, he muttered, half dragging his manically laughing friend out the back door. The transition back to reality was jarring, not because of anything magical, but just because it was suddenly quiet. The smell of wet linoleum was almost overwhelming after the rancid scent that the dungeon had in every different part of itself. Momo's shoulders sagged as she stood at the bottom of the ramp that shouldn't be here. I thought at least one of them would... She trailed off. Peer pressure, Simon sighed. Both sets of his memories were young enough to remember the feeling pretty well. Might need a new tactic. He held out a trio of books to her. Momo took one and pushed the others back. Thanks, she said. You want to head back with me? Simon asked, still concerned. Magneto misses you. Momo thought for a minute and then shook her head. If you can take my armor, I think I'd appreciate it. I don't know, I don't feel better, but I need to do something. Obviously violence isn't helping. Maybe I'll go wander around downtown and abuse my asphalt magic. I'll come pet the magnet dog later. Abuse how? Simon asked with concern. Like, fix potholes, make sidewalks wider. Momo shrugged. Fuck up those stupid anti-homeless spikes, make benches, that kind of thing. You're like an altruistic chaos gremlin, Simon told her with a perfectly straight face. Thanks, Momo told him as she peeled damp armor off of her sweaty limbs. And also thanks. For being you, I guess. Whoever you is. Kinda like it. Simon smiled. Yeah, he said. Anytime. In a place between worlds, 2 people sat in the front of a used hatchback that someone had salvaged out of a mostly intact 2-car garage in the ruined city of Taunton, making conversation on their way to somewhere else. Hey, can I ask a favor? Alana asked her boyfriend. Anesh glanced over at her from the report he was reading in the passenger seat. Of course, he said, adding before Alana could reply, You're 50% of my favorite people on the planet. You can always ask favors. Alana sort of wanted to make an irreverent joke about him being sappy, but Well, especially after the memory loss shit, there was just a warm feeling that came from how emotionally earnest and open both her partners were with their affection. And she didn't want to fuck that up, even if she was still getting back into the swing of things. Cute, she said with a smile. Anyway, I want to run an idea by you, and I want you to tell me if it's one of the actively horrible ones, okay? Setting his work down on his lap, Anesh tipped his head back and gazed out the window into the white fog between the real world and the dungeon. You don't have horrible ideas, he protested. Anesh, the last time I had a big idea, I basically proposed making having a body an upper-class luxury, Alana countered him. Yeah, well... Anesh opened his mouth and held up a hand to make a random gesture that didn't actually indicate anything. It was... well, you... Alright, fine, it was a bollocks idea, he admitted. What's this idea? She set her mouth in a smirk, refusing to be offended by what was simply acceptance of the truth. Okay, so is there a reason we aren't working to set up Taunton, or even one of the dungeons, as a kind of easy patch for homelessness? Alana asked. Especially Taunton, because it's got houses, and they're basically ours, right? Mostly, Anesh nodded. We own a shocking amount of it, and nobody's left to argue for the rest, but yes, there's several reasons. Active hostile threats are one, obviously, even in Taunton, where there's still a few thousand necrodes wandering around. I suppose especially in Taunton, because there's a few thousand necrodes wandering around. But also the infrastructure just isn't there. We don't have an actual supply of basic needs like power, food, clean water. Remember, most people don't even remember this place exists, yeah? And most of the buildings are damaged too. Terrible place to live. Not even better than nothing? Well, that's the thing, Anesh said. I asked Karen basically the same thing last week, and I think I got an answer that's not... Karen's great, but she has biases, yeah? But still, someone who's homeless in a city can access a lot of the elements of the city. We don't have those. We don't even have a grocery store to live from if someone's starving. We're basically cutting people off if we bring them here. Unless we covered everything. And while that's something we obviously want to work up to, we're only barely affording operating the order right now. Bah, Alana sighed. See, I knew it was stupid. Well, your heart's in the right place. Anesh tilted his head back down and his reading back up. That's important. And knowing why something won't help helps us work out a solution that does. He paused, and then added with a comically grim tone. Took until college for somebody to teach me that. Alana gnawed at her lip as she tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her boyfriend wasn't wrong, but he probably wasn't psychic, and maybe didn't know that her heart was a little bit harder than it had been a few years ago. She'd never really been in a great spot in life. Taking care of her sisters, tolerating or surviving their mom, Alana had grown up effectively in poverty, which was a sharp contrast to a lot of her long-term friends. But she'd always been able to think big picture about making things better, about how circumstances could be changed, because it was circumstances and systems that were the problem. Usually wasn't people. Then she'd been stranded, alone, and as vulnerable as someone like her could get without being basically chained to a wall, and Alana had gotten to know a lot of different people, and so many of them were assholes. Not just an asshole. There were plenty of benign assholes mixed in, but no, the people Alana had encountered had been cruel. They'd probably say that they'd been made hard by a hard world, but she saw what they were. Greedy, selfish. They operated in bad faith. They took what they could. They were petty tyrants and heartless bastards. And then she'd seen that attitude, suddenly, mirrored in a lot of the people who had built and run the systems and circumstances that hurt everyone else. Alana had started this whole magical world fixer thing, wanting to maybe start a renters union and make some new friends. Maybe friends that weren't human. Now, though, She was trying desperately to convince herself that there was any value in building anything if greed seemed to always overwhelm trust at every turn. Honestly, kind of surprised the route isn't slamming the door on us. Alana eventually broke the silence from the driver's seat as their car sped through thick white fog. Ephemeral and unreal hands tapping at the windows and pulling on the wing mirrors. From the passenger seat, Anesh didn't even glance up from the tablet he was looking at. A small hum was the most he acknowledged the comment. "You're doing paperwork, man." Alana glanced sideways. "I mean, management work. Whatever paperwork on a digital device is, you're doing bureaucracy." "That's got to get done," Anesh reminded her easily while he tapped out a response and sent a request for more information to somebody, before realizing that there could not possibly be email in this liminal space. "May as well be me while I wait," he told her. Alana looked out the side mirror where a shape like a playful wolf the size of a mountain bounded in the fog, either 4 feet or 4 miles away. "Yeah, but doesn't this place like it when you're, what did Elle phrase it as, running away from something?" "I am running away from something," Anesh told her, tipping the tablet down and looking out the window at the hypnotic twistings of the fog between worlds. "I'm running away from a world where I have to do paperwork." As if the words were a magic key, the world unfolded around them, the fog pulling back in organic fractal patterns, building a dusty road under the wheels, and an endless winding expanse of desert dirt and hot asphalt across the horizon. Overhead, 2 suns blazed, one red, the other a pale purple, and almost brushing the horizon. Together they covered half the sky. Alana let the car roll to a soft stop with only a little help from the brakes, tires crunching on the loose dirt and sand that covered the pavement near this point between Earth and the dungeon. While she threw the car in park and started rolling down her window to absolutely obliterate the lingering chill of a wet winter in Tennessee, Anesh clicked his tablet off and tossed it into the back seat. With an awkward stretch, he pulled his feet up onto the car seat and started trying to get a look at the road under them, trying to spot any speed bumps that were collecting around their tires. "I like this place," Alana said, closing her eyes as the dry heat washed into the car and over her skin. "Being honest, I'm also a bit ready for an environment that isn't raining all the time," Anesh admitted. A life in both England and then Oregon had mostly taught him 2 things. He liked sunny days, and for some reason he kept ending up in places where they were in short supply. The ground looked clear, though, so the 2 of them tentatively stepped out onto the hot surface. It was kind of evening here, with the suns not quite exactly overhead, but that didn't mean that it wasn't still broad daylight, with bright radiation painting everything in hot yellows and oranges. Anesh gave a respectful nod to the Earth-original scrub grass that grew out of the metal shard gravel that lined the side of the endless highway. James's attitude toward the determination of weeds had worn off on him a little bit. It was kind of fun to know that the normal plants from home could survive and thrive here, in a place that wasn't built for anything to be alive. "Everyone else come through yet?" he asked, circling the car to see Alana standing in the middle of the road, staring off into the distance. "Nope, they're probably doing paperwork." She grinned, her earlier bad mood banished by the sun and road. Anesh wasn't quite so giddy, still keeping an eye out on the road below them. He and James had never actually had to fight a speed bump, and Anesh still wasn't convinced they actually could. A mobile stone blister full of grinding teeth just didn't sound quite so easy to drive off or kill as a tumblefeed or a dragon did. When he looked back up, Alana was another 20 feet down the road, arms spread as she took in the dungeon for the first time. Despite having been in Townton when they'd fought the mechanic and the Horizonist cult, and coming back a few times for supply runs or to help out, she hadn't actually been in here before. "You all right?" he called out to her. When she turned back to Anesh, it was with a wide smile on her face. "This place is a playground," she announced. What? Anesh looked around the rocky desert, the uneven dirt and sand around them, and the road that stretched away eternally. The only thing within sight was a speck on the horizon that was maybe a gas station. You going mad? I get why I'll like this place. Alana nodded as she walked back toward him. This is going to be great. Cars are an expression of freedom, and there is nothing here but a place to go irresponsibly fast in a car. This is perfect. Anesh cleared his throat. You know James is planning to get rid of cars, right? What? Alana looked like someone had eaten a puppy in front of her. Thinking quickly, Anesh patted her on the shoulder. I'm sure we can design some kind of magical future car that doesn't kill the planet for you, he said. Because we love you. You can have a car. That's a terrible reason, Alana laughed. But whatever. I'll just enjoy this place. This place is so cool. Anesh had his doubts, partially because he was already sweating and starting to miss overcast days, which was a bad sign. But before he could protest, another vehicle cut through the boundary of the entrance, pulling to a stop beside theirs as it rolled out from underneath the archway of highway signs that listed destinations that had never been real. Then another vehicle pulling up behind them. Out of the pickup truck, the burly form of Bill swung to the ground. We all just loitering around? He called over cheerfully. Thought we were here to work. I love his enthusiasm, Alana spoke sideways to Anesh. I'm not here to work, Mark yelled from the cab of the moving van they'd swiped for this job. I'm here because no one knows how to drive stick. I hate his enthusiasm. Alana's smile didn't slip one bit as she waved to the two of them, and the other two Delvers along with them. All right, any last-minute shit before we get moving? She asked, slotting in perfectly to the personality of the two older men from the construction field. If I die, remember to turn me into a dragon and introduce it to my wife, Bill said, getting a nod of solemn agreement from Mark. Wow, the dragon afterlife is really popular, Anesh said as he ran a final check on his rifle magazines that he was handing out to everyone. You started a trend, he told Alana. Who wouldn't want to be a dragon in a future life, maybe? Alana grinned wolfishly. All right, we all know the plan? Let's go. She was back in the driver's seat before Anesh finished making sure every vehicle had a well-stocked gunner. The plan was simple, really. They knew Route Horizon was still asleep, or whatever that meant for a dungeon, and from experience they knew that sleeping dungeons were often far less hostile. It was the perfect time to explore, not just the roads themselves, but the land around them. The trunk was stocked with supplies, water, food, tools, even sheet metal for driving safely over the caltrop trenches and out into the desert, and a bunch of empty 50-gallon drums for pumping the gas stations dry. And there was so much waiting here. Weird materials, navigator seeds, magic gasoline, shards of spell maps. It wouldn't surprise Anesh if there was literal buried treasure somewhere in this dungeon, and they aimed to find out if that was true. Also, they wanted to see what happened when you copied the map chunks. And they wanted to test the limits for what could burn enchanted gas, and so many other things. They were prepared to take a little while here. You think James is going to regret missing out on this? Alana asked. Not a little bit. One of them messaged me earlier, Anesh said. He's having a good vacation, and he bloody needed one too, whether he admits it or not. This fun is ours. How many of you are there anyway? Alana suddenly thought to ask. I mean, if that's not rude, wow, why do I feel like that's rude? I mean, 2 of you sleep with me, so it's at least 2, but now I feel bad for asking, and... Deep breath, Anesh laughed as he cut her off. It isn't rude. We're going to need to establish a lot of new social norms, though, huh? Yeah, like public bathing, Alana cheerfully agreed. Anesh snorted. Well, anyway, it shouldn't be rude, and there's 4 of me. Me, 2 that stay around the lair in the office, and then the me that works at NASA. He shrugged. Probably won't spin up any new me's for a while, though. Why not? Alana asked as their car flew past a rock outcropping that cracked a large orange eye at them before settling back. You know, if that's not... Are you all right? Anesh asked her, concerned. You're normally... Okay, look, I don't want to be rude, but James once described your personality as like a social bulldozer, and you've been a lot less like you, and I'm worried. I'm worried I'm going to offend you. Alana threw one hand out into the air, keeping the other on the wheel as she sped onward. I love you and shit. I don't want to fuck this up. Okay, that's better. Anesh nodded knowingly. Well, thing is, each of me has a set of memories. When we sync up, I basically remember all of us. Unspeakably cool, Alana editorialized. Anesh nodded. Correct, he said stoically, pausing only briefly to make sure the black speck off to their right wasn't something closing in on their convoy from the desert at high speed. But, consider, all of those memories are real and valid. There isn't one me. All of me live all of my lives, okay? Still cool. Actually, hey, how does that work with the romance thing? Like, do you get double the feeling when James does that dumb lopsided smile at you and everything feels wobbly for a second? Remarkably specific. Anesh closed his eyes and let out an amused laugh. Also, yes, which is, as you subtly alluded to, cool, except... Well, there's two of me that aren't around for that. He shook his head, voice quieting to the point that it was hard to hear over the engine and the tires of the road. So, the me that works at NASA is adding a set of memories of getting to work on space probes. But also, that me doesn't go into dungeons. That me doesn't get to kiss you, doesn't have a lot of friends. He shrugged. It's not that bad. That me is still a me, and still has all the memory sets of everything else, but they're also adding in memories of lonely days, which are just as valid. Alana glanced over at him with sympathetic eyes. So, you don't make more of you because you're kind of competing with yourself for social needs? It wasn't really a question. Wow, that sucks, Alana announced. I feel bad for all the other yous now. I mean, it's fine, Anesh chuckled softly. Though I appreciate it, and it's not like it's a solvable problem. Hell it isn't, Alana announced, slapping a heavy hand on the wheel. Bring all of you to wherever I am. I can handle 4 Anesh at once. Anesh coughed into his hand. I think you... Yeah, I heard what I said, Alana barreled through. It wasn't explicitly meant to be that, but now it is. Well, Anesh trailed off, face flushed from something that wasn't the heat. Oh, thank fuck, there's a parking garage coming up. I'll radio back, get ready to stop for a bit. He furiously groped for any way to pull the ripcord on what had become an intensely embarrassing conversation. Alana shook her head as she passed the radio over to him. Oh, come on, we're forging new social norms, remember? I'm very glad this place is improving your mood so much, Anesh murmured as he clicked the radio. Car 1 to convoy. We got a point of interest coming up on the right. Slowing to investigate. Over. Alana let the conversation go. They had plenty of time for personal conversations, deep discussions, and goofing around. They'd be on the road for a couple of days. For now, though, she rolled her shoulders as she let the car drop from something like 80 to a more manageable speed for a parking lot. There were places to explore, and monsters to fight, and Anesh was right. This place really was helping her mood.